Hello, this is Jamie Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on Libertarian Censored subreddit. And let's get right into it. So first we have Meta's Zuckerberg caught in a revealing hot mic moment with Trump. After offering to spend at least $600 billion through 28 in the U.S., he whispered, "I'm sorry, I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure what number you wanted to go with." From PCMag.com, and that's a cross post from the technology subreddit. And I was posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I think Trump and the government shouldn't be getting involved with private business. But with that being said, big business and big government are pretty much inherently joined at the hip in the current government structure. That's why it was the right and the left. The Tea Party was pretty much saying back in the early 2010s, big government is the source of all our problems. Well, the Occupy Wall Street movement was saying big business is the source of all our problems. When in reality, big government and big business are pretty much the exact same thing a lot of the time, and that's why they started pushing stuff like Trump and identity politics to divide people. Because in reality, a lot of people do have common ground. They're against the elites who control big government and big business, and like you're seeing here with Mark Zuckerberg, he's saying Trump's pretty much telling him what number to invest, spend, and that's just going to show they might act like they're different, but they're all ruled by the same elite class. As George Carlin famously said, it's a big club and you ain't in it, and this is a good example of that. Next, we have Chicago Digs the Fuck In, and that's posted by CH4Locks, and that's crosspost from the Chaotic Good subreddit, which looks like it's since been deleted. And yeah, personally, I think that's in relation to Trump planning to send National Guard troops there. Personally, I don't really care for crime in the inner cities, but with that being said, I think the National Guard stuff is mostly just performative, because, they mostly seem to just stand around and pick up trash rather than actually fight any crime. And yeah, ultimately, you can have infinite police, but you can still have bad actors coming through and killing people. Like it's like that picture from the train recently what happened in Charlotte last month with that DeCarlos Brown Jr. stabbing that Irina Zakutska or whatever her last name was. I think it was Zakutska. But yeah, just because you try and fight crime as much as possible doesn't mean it's always going to be successful. You always might have some murders happen. Murder's been illegal pretty much since they first started writing laws down, but it still happens, and that just goes to show you, just because the state tries to do something doesn't mean it's going to actually work. I think the libertarian position is, we shouldn't use the state to fight crime. We need private individuals to unite to voluntarily unite to fight against crime, I would say. And yeah, I would say the libertarian position is more for private militias enforcing the law rather than public police departments. And yeah, if you ever see someone about to take out someone else and you want to act on it and stop them, I think you should be able to. Ultimately, it's each individual's. People are going to justify what they justify regardless of the system of government in place. So yeah, it's ultimately each individual's decision. If they see someone being robbed and they want to stop the robbery, they should be able to. But if they want to justify walking on by as well, they should be able to as well. But I think the libertarian position is, liberty thrives when people feel safe. So I personally think people do need to be held accountable if they steal or try and hurt others. And that's my thought on that issue. Next we have Dear Leader threatens to start civil war to own the libs from independent.co.uk, posted by CH4Locks, and that's the actual headline is Apocalypse Now. Trump threatens Chicago with Department of War and suggests ICE raids imminent. And yeah, personally, I think that's just more theater than anything else. I'm sure when he actually sends the National Guard in, it'll be like the National Guard in Washington just stand around and pick up trash rather than anything else. But of course, Reddit, they need as many Orange Man bad posts as possible, because that's what the central narrative of Reddit has pretty much been for the past 10 years at this point. It's like the same reason why, it's like how you can't go on X right now without seeing the picture of DeCarlos Brown Jr. about to knife Irina Zarutska to death. That aligns with the rights narrative of, oh, crime is high and we have this video to prove it. Ultimately, social media is very much, people are gonna all push their own agendas and biases, and it's important to note that everyone's got something they want to sell you, and it's especially true in regards to social media. Social media is very much the modern public square, and as I have said in the past, it's control the narrative, control the people, and you definitely see that on social media. Then we have SC bill will make providing information about abortion unlawful, including via a website or phone call, outlawing speech from ACLU-SC.org, posted by CH4Locks, and that's a cross post from the Not the Onion subreddit. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is if you want to justify telling someone something, you should be able to, if it's about abortion or about anything, that's freedom of speech and freedom of association. But if that being said, if the state wants to justify enforcing whatever laws it feels like, ultimately the state has the legal monopoly to force justify whatever using whatever force it feels like. And yeah, I personally think the libertarian position is, freedom of speech, freedom of association. Well, with that being said, the woke Reddit mob only cares about this because it involves abortion. I'm sure if it was information about any dissent at all from the official DNC narrative, Reddit would have it be illegal. But Reddit only seems to care about it's Reddit. They act like they're libertarians since the out group's in power currently. But the second the in group takes power again, suddenly they'll justify any authoritarianism the state does. It's like it's like that they say abortion, my body, my choice, but they also wanted vaccine mandates and mask mandates. It just goes to show you, they have no principles other than in group good, out group bad. If they all say, oh, I'm a free thinker, but then the narrative comes knocking at the door, and suddenly, the free thinking goes out the window. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have TV broadcasters censored from showing folks about Boo Earns to Trump at U.S. Open. Sad. Posted by Donald Key, and that's cross post from the Blue Sky Skeets subreddit. That looks like a post from Marissa Cabas, who posted, what the actual fuck? U.S. Tennis Association. We ask all broadcasters to refrain from showcasing any disruptions or reactions in response to the president's attendance in any capacity, including ENG, electronic news gathering coverage. And then she linked to an article about that from the benrotheberg.com. And yeah, personally, I think it's freedom of speech. If the networks wanted to show Trump getting booed, they should have been able to. But if that being said, if the U.S. Tennis Association does want to ask them to not show that, I think they should be able to as well. Freedom of speech. People will justify if they got justify, regardless of the system of government in place. If they wanted to not show Trump getting booed, I personally, think, they shouldn't be forced to if they don't want to. But of course, on Reddit, I'm sure that they wouldn't even focus on the match. If it was Reddit, they just focus on the orange man getting booed 24/7 and just play that on a loop. So that's my thoughts on that issue. And then we have the State Department under Trump's America, posted by Claybine, and that looks like a tweet from the Department of State at the State Department. Our nation was founded on the recognition that moral virtue and steadfast faith in God are necessary conditions of freedom, yet under the Biden administration, U.S. foreign policy belittled Christianity and weaponized government against faith. That era has ended. Under POTUS's leadership, the State Department will eradicate practices that devalue and demean the Christian faith, and then they link to an article from Fox News. And then Claybine added, no big deal, just literally the state establishing theocracy in the United States. And yeah, personally, I think both sides in the Christianity debate, in regards to its role in the state, are too extreme. On one side you have the Christian nationalists who want to have Christianity inform all policy decisions for the government, and I think that's a little too far into one direction. And on the other direction, you have the woke Reddit atheists who want to make Christianity illegal 100%. And yeah, I think both directions are too far. I think libertarian position is, if you want your faith to inform your beliefs, that's fine, but you shouldn't be forcing it on other people, and especially if they don't consent to it. And I think the stuff like this shows increasingly the state has become the new church, and to a lot of people, that, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think increasingly, it's almost like it's its own religion with its own heroes. I think there was a Wikipedia article around that, the American civic religion, and you definitely see that. They worship people like Abraham Lincoln, and they value the union above all else. And yeah, I think that's the big problem is, the United States, it might be, it shouldn't be a religion, it should just be a country and a system of laws. But, to a lot of people these days, especially in the post-Civil War era, it's become a religion. And, that's why I think, it's time to, I think it's time to kind of dissolve it because it's just too much of like it's shown that it's kind of irreformable at this point, and I think it's better we go our own separate ways than rather than have an authoritarian centralized dictatorship. Rather than we need a decentralized libertarian voluntary association government. Next, we have Trust the Autocracy, hosted by CH4Locks, and that's cross-post from the Political Memes subreddit. And that's supposed to Spyro from where you guessed it, Israel, and that looks like a post of Carolyn Levitt at the White House press secretary room, and then there's the black kid, the meme of the little black kid rubbing his hands, and then Carolyn Levitt says, "So you're telling me ICE now has approval to use zero-click spyware to monitor all mobile phone activity, and we're supposed to trust that it won't be used to spy on any anti-MAGA person with a political or social media platform?" And yeah, that just goes to show you how the state is able to pretty much, Reddit only seems to care since, Orange Man bad currently, but, the state has really been able to justify spying on whatever citizen they want to for years now. The NSA stuff was back in 2013 when that initial information that the NSA was spying on Americans, and yeah, it's probably only gotten worse since then. But of course, Reddit only cares because Orange Man bad. They don't have. I'm sure if Joe Biden's administration was spying on Americans who descended all from the official DNC narrative, Reddit would be completely fine with it. Then we have Trump won't make airlines pay for delays, what passengers should know, from Newsweek.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, Trump administration dropped Biden era plans for expanded protections for delays and cancellations. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is, the state shouldn't have any role in airline regulation, just like everything else. So yeah, I think if the airline should be the one who's deciding its policy regarding for delays and cancellations, not Trump or Biden. But sadly, we live in a very statist world, so people want the government to do everything. And yeah, I personally don't really care for delays, but it should be the airline's business, not that of the state. Then we have Supreme Court lists restrictions on LA immigration stops set after a sweep swept to get up U.S. citizens from APnews.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that. But as I said earlier, the state can justify doing whatever it wants to since it has legal monopoly use of force. If the state wants to justify going after people because they think they might be Hispanic, or they might be illegal immigrants because they're brown and they're Hispanic and they speak Spanish, ultimately, I think they should have more. They should do more research before going after people. But ultimately, they have the legal monopoly on force to justify using force for whatever reasons they want to. Next, we have national conservatism has a bigotry problem. Whether Yoham Hazony wants to admit it or not, nobody ever said that to be a good nation you have to love Jews. Hazony declared at last week's National Conservative Conference from Reason.com, hosted by Ninja Lover, and that's cross-post from the We the Fifth subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that, but with that being said, it's ultimately... national conservatism, the big problem is it's an inherently forced collectivism. We need a voluntary collectivism, and I think the libertarian position is, if you want to love Jews, that's fine. If you want to hate Jews, that's fine. But, you gotta, leave them alone as long as they're not forcing anything down your throat. Same with every other group. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Why Google Got Off Easy from nytimes.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they said, on Tuesday, a federal court in Washington has a wide open shot to hold Google accountable for sweeping antitrust violations. Instead of taking the shot, the court backed the puck off the board, hoping for a lucky bounce. The court's remedy was supposed to translate that victory into accountability, but Tuesday's rulings, which requires the Google share its search results and some other data for rival companies, fell short. The court declined to order Google to divest its Chrome browser, puzzlingly even permitted Google to keep paying billions of dollars each year to rivals like Apple and to make Google search the default choice on their devices, even though it was the very tactic that Google used to legally cement its dominance. And yeah, I personally think the libertarian position is, if you don't want to use Google, you shouldn't be forced to use Google. And yeah, I think the state shouldn't be involved at all in regards to private business. Google should be able to, if you want to justify using Google, that's fine. But the libertarian business, you shouldn't be forced to use Google if you don't want to, and that's what we see currently. I think if Google's a natural monopoly and without state backing, that's fine. But if it does have any state backing, you gotta get the state backing out and allow the free market, to be the predominant factor rather than the state and the market collaborating. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump's Department of War rerun may cost taxpayer $1 million despite wasteful spend crackdown from the Mirror.com, posted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the Fed News subreddit. And yeah, personally, it just goes to show you that the government, regardless of which branch of the uniparty is in power, will just piss away money like there's no tomorrow. But of course, Reddit only cares since it's the Orange Man doing it currently. They didn't care at all when Sleepy Joe was doing it. So it just goes to show you, no values, only teams. And we have America is to stand against Trump and his corrupt regime, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's crossed from the Share Market Update subreddit, and that looks like a Fox News clip picture of Steve Miller, and it says Miller, men will not be allowed in women's spaces. And yeah, personally, I guess the joke is, oh, Steve Miller is yeah, I don't really get this one, but it's Reddit, so it's Steve Miller is one of their favorite targets after Trump. So yeah, it's increasingly, if they want to go after him, I guess that's their prerogative. You just kind of get tired of it after a while with every post pretty much being the same thing. Then we have Supreme Court says fuck your due process from ABC7.com, hosted by CH4Locks, and yeah, ultimately, the actual headline is Supreme Court lists restrictions on LA immigration stops set after agents swept up U.S. citizens. And yeah, ultimately, due process is something that, we probably should have, but ultimately, as I said earlier, the state has the legal monopoly and needs to justify enforcing whatever laws it wants to. So, it does, it's something that, it's a privilege rather than the right. And ultimately, with a centralized state, everything is a privilege rather than the right. If the state can justify pretty much doing whatever it wants to and face no consequence for doing it, that just goes to show you the state is too powerful. And we have ICE spends $1 million on Clearview AI facial recognition to find people assaulting officers from 404media.co, posted by Donald Key, and that's crosspost from the technology subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't really think the U.S. government should be spending millions on all the AI facial recognition. But ultimately, as I said, they have the legal monopolies to force us by spending whatever money they want to on whatever bullshit they want to. Next, we have, this is a photograph of Trump's birthday letter to Epstein from Helpful Eating, posted, and that's crossed from the Pic subreddit. It looks like a crudely drawn image of a woman, and it says, voiceover, there must be more to life than having everything. Donald, yes there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald, we have certain things in common. Jeffrey, yes we do, come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never change, have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me that the last time I saw you. Donald, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday. Was any every day be another wonderful secret, and then it has a signature Donald J. Trump. And yeah, ultimately, Trump says this is fake, but ultimately, if you want to believe it's fake or not, it's kind of irrelevant. It just goes to show you that the elites, Donald Trump may market himself as being anti-elite, but they're all just in the same bed. As I said earlier, George Carlin famously said, "It's a big club and you ain't in it." And yeah, Reddit only seems to care about the Epstein files currently because Donald Trump's in there, but there might be a lot of people who are Reddit considers to be in the in-group in there as well, and they need to remember that as well. They should, just like everything else, the Epstein files are being marketed very partisanly currently, when in reality I think the libertarian position is, it's just another example of the uniparty, how they're all involved with, Epstein and his Mossad operation to blackmail everyone. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. And I also want to share a post I made to the Libertarian Party USA subreddit. And I said thoughts on this latest Reddit change, and I said, in case you were out of the loop, a few months ago, Reddit began allowing users to hide their posts and comment histories from a purely libertarian perspective. I think this was a good idea. If users don't want to allow others to have access to their posts or comment histories, and the website gives them the option, they should be able to. However, in practice, it leaves a lot to be desired, especially since a lot of bots and otherwise bad faith actors now have a way to hide from further scrutiny, and thus will become harder to spot. It also shows you how a lot of people on this website are unwilling to stand by what they say. It's why I personally would never do it. That's also the reason I'm not afraid to attach my real name and face to my account. Thoughts. And yeah, just because you're offered an option doesn't mean you should be able to take it. It's like when Lester Manox should have had the option to refuse to serve people on their his restaurant based on their skin color. I personally think he shouldn't have done that. But it's the same thing here. If Reddit wants to allow users to hide their post comment histories, that's fine. But ultimately, it's just gonna it just shows you how it's going to be abused by bots and bad faith actors, and also will show you how many of your editors are afraid to stand by what they say because they don't want I guess people going through their post and comment histories, and it just goes to show you, Reddit doesn't, a lot of Redditors might sound like they're very principled, but in reality, they're just partisan hacks who might as well they're pretty much the new generation of cable news, just partisan hacks throwing narratives at you. That's pretty much all social media, to be fair, but Reddit in particular is bad, especially since it won't it's pretty much will always align with whatever the official DNC narrative is, and the only complaint against them will be, oh, they're not progressive enough. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.